Hello all, I am Shelley Casey and this is me briefly taking you through what it looks like when I get to work with teams or people like myself as an educator and a nerd get to work with teams to help them look at their curriculum and embed ICT in a meaningful way actually into their teaching and learning. So this workshop is often called How Do I Go About Embedding ICT in My Teaching, but it has a bit of a subtext and that is without crushing my spirit and so that it makes a difference to the learners. Because if you're just using the technology because someone's instructed you have to, or the parents are demanding it because they've brought a BYOD device that you use it, it's probably not the best reason. So we sort of look at things in terms of, well, let's make a real difference to these learners and see what happens. So we start by picking a task. Now, normally we talk a little bit about, say, in this case, I'm going to skip this because you can get that information from one of my other little podcasts. But basically, what we do is we jump in with an existing task. Okay? Now, depending on the group we're working with, it's often an assessment task or a topic or a unit, an area of study. We've even started with a weekly planner. So actually looked holistically at what someone's doing over the week and then built from that. Okay. We did start small though. The other thing we often look for is a task that's meaningful. So it's a task you keep coming back to. That would be a really interesting one to have a look at and redesign. The good news is what we find is once we go through this with one task, teachers often take the skills and build on them. So in this case we have a Year 8 English essay. Hey, this is the original task sheet. There's lots of information in it, suggested timelines, exit, entry points, learning intentions, some resources that help them structure, some guidelines for feedback. It's all there. This is quite lengthy and this is a Year 8 unit of work. So that was the task we started with. Number 2, we started to think about why we actually wanted to look at this particular task. We had to work out what was not negotiable, and this is where we had to call on teachers within the school to say, well, look, what are the things that we must have in this in line with what the school's recommended? Also, we wanted to work out what the learning intentions were for this particular assessment task and also link it back to the context. So we had to do a bit of thinking first so we're all on the same page. We used a Google Doc, put those questions up there, and had a bit of a discussion. So all this starts before we even look at the technology. We actually look at why we're doing it. So in other words, the teaching and the learning is at the centre, not the technology. So from there, we took the existing task and we PMI'd it. Now in this case, we used a program called Sketch. It was free and it allowed us to annotate the task, but it also had the second sort of benefit of allowing staff to learn a tool for themselves. So we're actually training them in Sketch, modelling it, and it actually made a huge impact because the staff realised I can use that with my learners. So it had a really great sort of twofold purpose there. Just a heads up though, when we started PMI, this is where it gets uncomfortable. Why? Because we're looking at the assessment task which people in the room may have developed, which people might be quite attached to. You will notice there'll be differing opinions on things, and it's really important to sort of set some parameters around that conversation and that work in. So from the PMI, we brainstormed, and this is where we really used the ideas of the group, and we really valued the suggestions which people were throwing out there, even if at this stage they may not be workable or even in the realm of possible. Also, we included things which staff were really uncomfortable with. They didn't know how to do that, but we put it all on paper. And we used a coach, or an e-nerd in this case, to sort of help with that and to help make the connections about what is possible, where we can grow, how we can do this. From that brainstorm, we came up with an idea. And this is where schools sort of vary when we're doing this kind of task. With this particular school, one of the big pieces of feedback was that the task sheet was actually very difficult to read and to follow and was overly complex. So we actually started by redesigning that first. And that's an example. In fact, that is the task as it stands now. So it's a flowchart with really clear outcomes. The checkpoints are marked in there. And any links in information the students need is now in there. Okay, so they get that. And we sort of built these resources based on all those conversations we had in the brainstorming. So we taught the teachers how to make Google Forms to get information back for them. So the students now planned using the exact same information using Google Forms. What that meant, it came straight to the teacher, one document, they had all the information. It was much, much quicker. It also meant the teacher wasn't chasing it up, bits of paper, giving them back. They could give all the feedback in this Google form that this led to. Okay. We also then got the students to draft their essays, so they're still actually targeting those skills that they're meant to be. They're still writing an essay, okay? But we then summarised the feedback using a Google form. Google Doc. The students could share this with their thoughts, next to it see their peers' thoughts, and then share it with their parents and get in one document all that information. Okay. We had things such as collaborative Padlets to help break down some of the ideas that we wanted the students to look at. So they were asked to focus on sizzling starts or tightening tension. So we got the students to create a resource board of things that help other students understand what that is. And we can keep adding to this, as in the 7 steps to writing are something the Year 8s will continually go back to for that entire year, and they can continually keep adding to this resource bank. So we built that in. You'll notice the task changed slightly towards the end. We asked students to make a visual representation. They could use Stella. This is one example. Please note this is a remake. It's the students' words, and we copied their images but just recreated them using adults because we didn't have permission to use the student images. But suddenly we changed it, and suddenly the students were engaging at a completely different level, using technology, using imagery, and completing a similar task but in a far more engaging manner, and that was the feedback our students gave as well. Okay. But this didn't just happen. There was lots of modelling with the team, so it was about teaching the teachers how to do these things. There was a bit of time that we had to factor into the teaching and learning for the students to learn the apps, to establish protocols, to set up accounts. All that just doesn't happen. You sort of need to factor it into what you're doing because you're actually teaching them the skills required to function in that 21st century reality. Okay. It's totally okay to divide up tasks and skills. So we had some staff that are exceptionally good at doing forms now, whereas others are exceptionally good at understanding the sharing permissions in Google, and they can tap into each other again when they need to. Okay. Then, and this is probably the most important part about it, is we evaluated it. So the staff and the students both gave their feedback. In this case, it's a Padlet when they were just asked a PMI. In terms of what they thought about the task, and then that will be used to continue to grow. Alternatively, there's a quicker way, okay? Not as detailed, not as enriched, but we also understand schools, so time can be an issue there. So basically, in this case, started the same way, picking a task. Okay. Then the staff made a shared agreement. Okay. So what they found is a single way to enhance the task and then divide up who does what. This is a great one for smaller tasks or when you have less time. And we used a template which you can see there. Okay. It outlined things like what do we want to achieve, what tools could we use. Okay. Now this only worked because the school had a list of tools that the staff could use. Even if they didn't know how to, they knew that the students would have those tools on their devices. And then we just went through and listed what people could adjust. So these are all the things that people had ideas about. The SAMR was filled in, as in, is this a substitution? Is this an augmentation? Is this actually getting into the transformational stages of modification or redefinition? And we sort of looked at it holistically. Interestingly, it's a great activity to evaluate a task as well, because if you find yourself going, well, these are all our uses of technology, and they're all in this S, you know, okay, so we need a little bit of work here to sort of start transforming the learning for that technology to be really used effectively. Okay? So from there, they divided up what they were going to do, ensuring that one part of it was at least into this stage. Okay? The staff were pretty good in this case at the substitution, so they were using the technology, mainly just to replace handwriting in this case, but we needed to make sure we were at least growing into this in some way, shape or form. Then it ended exactly the same way. Went back to the learners and asked, how did this impact on you? How did it change your learning? Okay? And then teachers were asked, how did it change your teaching? So that is the quick overview of how you can go about embedding ICT in teaching and learning using a coach or mentor. Thank you.